Hello and welcome folks to my Focke-Wulf 190 D9 Quick and Dirty tutorial for DCS. The Dora 9 is the beautiful late war version of the famed Focke-Wulf 190. The D9 has an inverted V12 liquid-cooled engine compared to the 14-cylinder BMW radial engine on the A series. The engine controls and the cockpit layout is very advanced in the FW 190. Most systems are working automatically, and so you don't have a mixture control, you don't have a propeller control. Most auxiliary systems are electric, and so we can just concentrate on the task at hand, which is to fly and operate the plane, and that is what we will now do. So, before engine start checklist, as usual, controls correct and let's see, and free, that is working. Then we will move over here to this right forward electrical panel and push in all the switches. Now the plane is light and alive. We go over here, check if we have fuel on board. Currently it is showing the forward tank, then we switch it back to the after tank. There's also fuel on board. Note those two little bulbs over here. The lower one in white will indicate when the rear tank is running dry, and the upper one in red will indicate when the forward tank is dry. Then we move over here, nothing yet, to the fuel selector, which we will put fully up to both tanks. Then we check that the magnetos are off, and we put the throttle in the start up position here. Check that the trim is set to neutral and move over to the flaps. We will put the flaps up, and you should hear the sound of the flaps being retracted, and you can see the indicator moving. That works on both sides. So wonderful. Now we are ready to start up. You have to apply the brakes, check that the propeller area is clear. Then we put the magnetos to both, go to the rear electrical panel over here and activate all fuel pumps and the navigation lights. Then we put that little latch aside so we have free access to the starter. You can see you can push that in and pull it out. How the engine start on the D9 works is if you push it in, a flywheel will be spun up, and when that has enough RPM, you pull the stick, the starter out, and the clutch engages, and that should turn the prop. You should have to push this down for 15 to 20 seconds, and if it does not, if you do not hear the sound, whining sound, you might have to push it in a second time. So let's try. Okay. Now it winds up, and now we count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, and that should be enough, and engage. And the engine catches. Stay on the brakes. Check for 1200 RPM, and that we got oil pressure over here. So secure that. Perfect. Before we taxi, the D9 has the lockable tail wheel, but it is not steerable. You lock it by pulling the stick fully back, and if you just release it like this, the tail wheel will disengage. For turning on the ground, you will have to disengage it, and so yeah, it's a little bit more tricky here than in the P51. The brakes are pretty solid, and so you might see that the plane is nervous while the engine is currently warming up. Also note here that I use the same joystick curves for all planes, and this means on the D9 you actually feel that the plane is more sensitive on the controls, and you will see that, I think, going all through the video. So now let's taxi. Temperatures look good. And let's, little note, pilot handbook of the original says don't taxi with the tail wheel locked on the ground. Well, that might be a little bit troublesome in DCS, so feel free to lock it, but keep in mind, disengage it before you turn. As usual, try to look ahead, stick your head out and turn in S-curves when possible. You immediately see here how sensitive the plane reacts to any inputs. Get the tail wheel straight and lock it up for the runner. Close the canopy and make sure there's nothing behind you that you blow away. According to the original handbook, the run-up should be done at full throttle, but I found that the plane started to move. So what we try is we try to get the RPM to around 3,100 to 3,200 and then check the magnetos. There is not much more that we can check at that at this plane because there are so few systems. The temperatures look good. That are these two gauges over here, and now we can throttle up, stick fully back, brakes applied. Magneto 1, the other one sounds good, looks good now, systems, everything looks fine, throttling back, don't relax on the brakes, idle seems to work, very nice, back to 1,200 RPM. Then we are ready for a before takeoff checklist. Flaps are up, trim is neutral, magnetos are to both, fuel selector is to both, systems look good, all switches on and the canopy is closed and locked. On the takeoff, it is important to keep the tail low, probably let the plane just fly itself off. The takeoff I find is a little bit more tricky in the FW because you just have the tail wheel to be locked and you don't have a rudder trim. So all that has to be done with manual input on the rudder, and I find it is much easier in the simulation to over control the D9 than to over control the P51. So we will roll out on. A good lineup is very important, because if you have not engaged the tail wheel and you're not properly lined up, you will get to one side of the runway. I will try to just slightly lower, raise the tail at around 130 to 150 kph, but not really much. I will see how the plane feels and how stable it is. So this looks, yeah, looks like a proper lineup. Engage the tail wheel lock and then smoothly to full throttle. Release the brakes. Full throttle, keep her straight, right rudder. This plane is accelerating. And there she lifts off. Be careful, let the plane accelerate. Raise the gear. Gear comes up, indicators go down. Be sure not to go beyond the limit of 300 kph. Best climb speed is 280. Gear is up, and then we can throttle back to 3000 rpm for the climb. So that's nice. So now about general flying, there's not much you have to do in the D9. You can set cruise settings somewhere between 2100 to 2700 rpm. The only thing you really have to monitor is your fuel state. The fuel system on the D9 works in a way that it is usually fed from both tanks at the same time. While you're cruising, at some point one tank will run dry. That should normally be the rear tank. And when that happens, you have to move this fuel lever over here to shut down the tank that ran dry. And then you have to look over here and deactivate the fuel pump that belongs to that tank. And there's not more that you can do, not more to monitor. You can just enjoy the plane and retrim it so for level flight, so everything works. The approach in the plane is straightforward. You deaccelerate to something between 1800 rpm and 2100 rpm. Same as in the P51, it is you need to get the speed out of the plane. So what I prefer in the D9 is actually to come pretty low and then do a brake, climbing turn into my pattern altitude. What also should be noted is, you cannot see it here from my perspective, you have to manually open the cool flaps fully. As you can see there, I've mapped the key to that, and this should actually help deaccelerate the plane, and it helps to keep the engine cool. So deaccelerate, open the cowl flaps fully, and then go for the overhead approach. One should note, the manual says the flaps should not be fully down above 300 kph, but does not give a limiting speed for the takeoff flap settings. So that's quite interesting, because I think those flaps have a limiting speed. I found that you won't damage them if you lower them at anything below 450 kph. So here we go, 2100 rpm, cowl flaps are fully open. We are at 420, so let's hit the first stage of flaps. There might be a slight tendency to drop the nose, not very pronounced. We are at 300 meters, which is a good altitude. We go over the field, deaccelerate a little bit further to help the speed lower. You see we're already at 350, and then we go at the end of the field. We go into a left-hand brake into the downwind. The turn should deaccelerate the plane further. Might have to climb up a little bit. Once we're below 300 kph, we lower the gear. The indicators come out. We have to retrim the plane. And now altitude still looks good. And then we can lower the flaps fully. And in the pattern we have a speed of around 250 to 280. You have to retrim, else the nose will fall down. In the base turn, try to lower the speed to roughly 250 kph. And now we just throttle accordingly to the speed we want. The landing for the final, we aim for about 220 kph. and we will flare out the plane in full 3-point attitude so that when it settles we have the stick full back and have the tail wheel locked. 240 kph looks good. Keep in mind that once the plane noses down, it really takes up speed. So here we are, look a little too fast, but that will work out. Look fast, speed 220, throttle back to idle and flare the plane out. 3-point attitude, just let her sink in. And there she's down, stick full back, keep her straight, carefully apply the brakes, carefully apply the brakes, carefully apply the brakes, don't let the engine die. So here we are, nice landing, you saw it did not really take long. After landing checklist, not much to do here. Get the flaps up, open the canopy. Cowl flaps, you see they are fully open and they can stay there, so the engine is cooling. Taxi off the runway, as usual, be careful. So when you're in parking position, if the engine needs to further cool down, keep it running at 1200 RPM, but the temperatures over here look quite good, so shutdown is also easy. Move the throttle back to idle, then you have to move it into the shutdown position. The engine will shut down and die. Then magnetos are off, fuel selector goes to off. You can also here, if you like, you can put the trim back to neutral. Then this is done. Rear electrical panel, pop out all those switches, open the front panel, and here the same, you have to hit those little red buttons and the switches will pop out. And then close this, and that's it. this was my quick and dirty tutorial for the FW190 D9 in DCS. I hope you enjoyed it and found it useful. If so, give a thumbs up below, and folks, always happy hunting and happy landings, and see you again here at Agathos Flight School in the future to more DCS tutorials. Bye bye!